Everything you've been told about the modern economy, it's basically a carefully crafted illusion. It's designed to keep you calm while the ground beneath your feet is being systematically rewired. I mean, you feel it, right? You feel it when you go to the grocery store or when you finally check that bank statement. Yes, the official headlines are practically cheering, insisting everything is absolutely fine. Today we're diving into the actual data to uncover what's really happening in what we call the ghost economy. This is a bizarre period where the metrics we use to measure success have completely detached from reality, mostly to hide a recession that is already here. And stick around, because we're also going to explore how the entire global financial system is quietly rewiring itself in the background while everyone's distracted.
So why exactly does the economy feel so broken if the official numbers look so incredibly good? It's a huge question, and honestly, it completely validates what you're experiencing every single day. By every official measure, things look great. Unemployment is hovering low around 4.4%, job growth seems really strong on the surface, and hey, the GDP is still growing. But everyday people, we feel like the ground is just giving away. And as we're going to see, this massive gap between your lived experience and the official data isn't an accident. The data just hasn't caught up yet.
Think of it like a split screen. On one side, we have the official narrative. This is what our policymakers are obsessed with optimizing for: strong labor markets, GDP growth, all the shiny stuff. But on the other side, we have your lived reality: shrinking purchasing power and rapidly disappearing savings. The economy that people actually live in and the economy being reported on the nightly news are just two completely different things. You are feeling a recession right now that the headline metrics are literally missing.
Now, we need to demystify how a recession is actually declared, because this is crucial. Recessions are always declared retroactively. The National Bureau of Economic Research needs to gather comprehensive data confirmation before they make a move. Take the dot-com bubble back in 2001. It started in March, but wasn't officially declared until November. Or the 2008 financial crisis. That one started in late 2007, but wasn't made official until a full year later. By then, Lehman Brothers had already collapsed, and the financial world had already begun to end. This isn't incompetence. It's just a methodology that requires absolute certainty. What this means for us is that you could be drowning in a financial crisis right now, today, and you won't know it officially for maybe 6 to 18 months.
And you really see this lag when you look at the employment data. 1.6 million, that's the staggering number of Americans who've just stopped looking for work since the pandemic. And here is the absolute kicker. Because they stopped looking, they are no longer counted as unemployed. Poof! They have completely vanished from the official statistics entirely. At the same time, overall labor force participation has dropped by 1.5%. So if you peek beneath those cheering headlines about a robust labor market, what you actually find is a steady, quiet drift of people simply giving up.
It gets wilder when you look at how the government actually counts jobs. Imagine a struggling worker loses one really good full-time position with benefits. To stay afloat, they're forced to take 2 part-time gigs. Well, the government's accounting magic records that as 2 brand new jobs added to the economy. It goes down as net job growth. Across the economy, secure full-time positions are systematically disappearing, being replaced by multiple part-time roles with zero security. It's literally like pretending the housing market is absolutely thriving because everyone still has a roof over their head, while conveniently ignoring that they were all forced out of their houses and into tiny studio apartments.
Which naturally leads us to this genuinely terrifying number: $1.28 trillion in record credit card debt. Look, average people are battling over 25% cumulative inflation since 2020. To survive, they are desperately holding their lifestyles together using what is essentially plastic poison. Americans aren't swiping their credit cards for convenience or vacations anymore. They are borrowing at an average 22% interest rate just to cover the absolute basics. We are spending more, sure, but not because we're earning more. We're spending more because we are borrowing more.
And because we're borrowing just to survive, the personal savings rate has completely cratered. Historically, Americans saved around 8% of their income. Today, it's plummeted down to just 4.5%. Now combine this vanishing savings rate with over 24,000 corporate bankruptcies, which is the highest level in over a decade, by the way, and you have an entire constellation of pre-recession indicators lighting up. This is textbook pre-recession behavior. It follows the exact same pattern we saw in 2001 and 2008, where the leading economic index declined for 6 consecutive months right before the crash. It is exactly like your car's check engine light, oil pressure warning, and brake light all flashing at the exact same time.
So why doesn't the official data reflect all this panic? Well, it all comes down to a little thing called Goodhart's law. This is the psychological crux of the whole domestic illusion. Goodhart's law states that the moment a metric becomes a target, it ceases to be a good metric. Think about it. Once our policymakers start optimizing for a specific headline number, like the unemployment rate or GDP growth, they essentially stop optimizing for reality. Our system no longer measures the actual living economy. It simply manages the metrics to lower the headline number and make things look good.
Let me show you exactly how Goodhart's law creates these massive blind spots. In the official tracking buckets, if you work just 1 hour a week driving for DoorDash, you are thrown into the exact same employed category as a salaried software engineer. 1 hour. The metrics also count credit-driven spending exactly the same as income-driven spending when calculating the GDP. A dollar borrowed at 22% interest looks the exact same as a dollar earned. This massive, glaring gap between measurement and reality is exactly where recessions hide, right up until they become way too obvious to ignore.
Okay, so while our domestic economy is being masked by all this accounting magic, we really need to zoom out, because an even larger shift is happening on the global stage. While everyone is completely distracted by the shiny headline numbers at home, the entire global financial system is quietly rewiring itself in the background. And honestly, it is fascinating.
For 70 years, the US dollar has been the invisible engine of the world. But look at this trend line. Back in the year 2000, the US dollar made up 71% of global reserves. By 2010, that slipped to 66%. And today, it has fallen below 58%, hitting its absolute lowest level since 1992. The era of uncontested U.S. financial dominance is mathematically coming to an end. Every major global crisis since 2008 has quietly pushed central banks around the world to ask themselves a very dangerous question. Are we way too concentrated in dollar-denominated assets?
To understand why losing this matters so much, we have to talk about what economists call the exorbitant privilege. It's basically the ultimate financial cheat code. Because the world has historically been forced to route trade through New York correspondent banks just to use dollars, the U.S. gains 3 massive superpowers. First, intelligence. America gets a bird's-eye view of global trade data. Second, investment. Constant global demand for U.S. debt allows America to borrow at much cheaper rates, which saves an estimated $200 billion every single year. And third, jurisdiction. Supreme regulatory power over global transactions.
But then came a massive pivot point. The 2022 decision by the U.S. and its allies to freeze $300 billion in Russian sovereign assets and cut them completely off from the SWIFT banking network. Now, neutrally speaking, regardless of the politics behind that move, this action sent a truly terrifying signal to every other central bank on Earth. It practically yelled to the rest of the world that the financial lifelines they depend on can be switched off instantly if they cross Washington. So naturally, it forced nations to start looking for backup plans.
Enter the backup plan. The BRICS nations, which originally started with Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have now expanded to include major, massive energy players like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Collectively, they now represent over 25% of the global economy and nearly half of the world's entire population. This isn't just some casual trade group anymore. They are actively coordinating to build alternative financial infrastructure that exists entirely outside of Western rules.
Let's look at the actual specific tools they are piloting to bypass the dollar monopoly. Step 1 is the unit. This is a blockchain-based settlement tool designed as a neutral measuring stick for pricing commodities. It's backed 40% by physical gold and 60% by BRICS currencies. The whole point? Break the dollar's monopoly on price discovery. Step 2 is mBridge, a blockchain cross-border payment platform. These are the actual physical pipes being laid down right now to let countries trade directly with each other, completely routing around U.S. banks, U.S. infrastructure, and U.S. oversight. It creates optionality, and optionality is exactly what kills monopolies.
Now let's tie this global financial rewiring directly into physical geopolitical leverage. Consider the Strait of Hormuz. It is the single most important energy choke point on the planet, handling roughly 20% of the world's daily oil and 20% of the global supply of liquefied natural gas. When disruptions happen here, the general consensus has always been that the global economy is in deep trouble. But that is really only half the story today.
Because an energy shock today is entirely asymmetric. Think about it. 20 years ago, the U.S. was heavily dependent on foreign oil. But today, thanks to the shale boom, the United States is the largest oil and liquefied natural gas producer and exporter in the world. So if supply tightens in the Middle East, the U.S. simply faces a price problem, which actually generates massive revenue leverage for American energy companies. China, on the exact other hand, is the largest importer of oil, bringing in around 11 million barrels daily. For them, a disruption isn't just a price problem, it's a crippling structural supply crisis that can completely stall their manufacturing-based economy. The shock itself becomes a weapon of geopolitical leverage.
Which brings us to our final thought. We started by looking at the ghost economy, the carefully managed illusion of domestic stability masking deep financial cracks. We zoomed out to see a world aggressively building off-ramps from the US dollar while new geopolitical leverages being tested at global choke points. You see how it's all connected? The massive macro shifts directly impact that economic anxiety you feel at the grocery store. So, when the dust finally settles and the numbers are forced to align with reality, the bigger question is, who is going to be prepared and who is going to be completely blindsided? Take a hard look at the actual data around you, because understanding these shifts is your best preparation. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and stay curious out there.